monsoons have been full of drama. Dreadiest June and suddenly July come back. So what does that actually mean for your money and for your investments? Weak monsoon means weak economy.
So the first beneficiary of rain is actually unskilled agricultural workers.
If we see one good spell of rain in some small village of India, whose pocket benefits out of it?
These people spend almost 100% of their earnings.
What's that one number that you secretly check first?
It was the 5th worst June rainfall in the last 126 years. Products like pulses, oilseeds, it's more than 20% lower.
Does a single bad monsoon matter a retail investor's portfolio?
The impact is far lower on the equity market. Monsoon has a much stronger correlation with rural demand, small ticket FMCG, so small ticket consumer durables, fertilizers, other agrochemicals. Because of a bad monsoon, if the food inflation is going up.
What's the one thing about the monsoon that the whole market is ignoring right now?
Or which are actually getting impacted by the changing pattern of monsoon. This is something which we are quietly ignoring.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the first episode of our very interesting podcast series, The Big Picture. I am Devang Mehta, the CMO of the Anand Rathi Group and your host tonight. Every single day we all stare at the markets, the reds, the greens, but honestly, the thing that quietly moves the entire Indian economy is not the greens and reds of the stock market, but the Indian monsoons. And this year, the monsoons have been full of drama. Dreadiest June and suddenly July come back. So what does that actually mean for your money and for your investments? To decode all of it, I've got the perfect person. This man spent over a decade inside the Reserve Bank of India. So he's literally seen how the country's money works from the inside. Today, he is the Chief Economist at Anand Rathi. Please welcome Mr. Sujan Hajra. Sujan ji, welcome to The Big Picture.
Thank you. Thank you, Devang.
So let's begin with the questions, Sujan. There's this one belief: weak monsoon means weak economy. Is that still true? Can you give us your views on this?
So this was more true, say maybe 40, 50 years back, when agriculture was sort of 1/4 of GDP. Now, agriculture is just about 16 to 18% of GDP, one of the highest in the world among the major countries. But nevertheless, the importance of agriculture has gone down significantly. Earlier, the transmission channel from a bad monsoon and therefore a bad agriculture to the economy used to be in terms of output, used to be in terms of income. Now the transmission is more in terms of prices, because ultimately agricultural producers are the major part of it is food item. We also have cash crops. So deficient monsoon definitely impacts that. And that in turn makes the inflation, interest rate, consumption dynamics a little more uncertain. So the answer is both yes and no. It still has some impact, but certainly as compared to the past, the impact is far lower.
Sure. Thank you. So the next question for our audience is, if we see one good spell of rain in some small village of India, whose pocket benefits out of it? And how long does it take to show up in the rest of the economy?
It's actually a very interesting question. So let's see that if it rains today, within the next 7 days, the farmer will show. When the farmer shows, the kind of expenditure he incurs is on seeds, fertilizers, and unskilled agricultural workers. So the first beneficiary of rain is actually unskilled agricultural workers. These people spend almost 100% of their earnings on essentials. So the first thing they will do, you'll go to the Kirana store as soon as they get that money. And that's why if you see the FMCG companies track rain very closely. So this is the first leg of spending. The second leg comes about 3 to 4 months down the line. That's when the crops are cut. That's when the harvest matures. And then farmer almost gets one shot the proceeds from the crop. And in a good monsoon year, when he's getting good amount of money, he has certain priority in terms of spending. The first priority is obviously repaying loan. So if there is a good monsoon, with the recovery performance of the banks, NBFCs, that improves. The second stage comes about 90 to 120 days, so 3 to 4 months, when the crop is ready and crop is cut and sold in mandis. The farmers get money one time, but they have a priority in terms of spending during a good monsoon. The first tranche goes to repaying loans. The second tranche goes into buying other things. For example, buying a discretionary item like two-wheeler, buying a farm machinery like tractor, or buying gold for, say, sons or daughters' marriage. So that's the second leg. Now, with a good monsoon and a manageable inflation, the monetary policy also remains accommodative. So the interest rates remain low, and that's when the whole economy benefits. So in terms of timeline, if you look at, once the rain falls, within 7 days, the impact is on the agricultural workers. Within a week or so, the impact is on FMCG companies. With a 3-4 month lag, the impact is on banks in terms of their collection. Then there is impact on the, say, consumer durable companies, two-wheelers. So typically, a good monsoon will result in a good second quarter, that is quarter ending September, for the FMCG companies. It will result in a good fourth quarter, that is by March. You will see banks and all will benefit from that, and the whole economy within a 6 to 9 month framework, there can be earnings growth acceleration, or a re-rating of valuation. So that's how typically monsoon works.
Sure. Sujan, the official numbers say inflation is under control, but our grocery bills say something completely different. You sat inside the RBI. So tell me honestly, who's telling the truth here? The data or our wallet?
Actually, I think both are telling the truth, but they are answering two different questions. See, the fact of the matter is that if you look at the inflation number for June, that in itself will partly tell you the story. The story is that retail inflation is 4.4%. Food inflation is 5.3%. So the food prices are rising faster than the overall inflation. Now, CPI tracks about 300 individual products. For your wallet, it's 10 products will be of most important, and in most cases, it will be in most cases. This is the inflation which you will feel is impacting you. And there is an interesting dichotomy. The dichotomy is that you will remember that ginger prices are costing 50% more. That ginger inflation is 50%. Tomato inflation is 32%. But you won't remember that the potato inflation is minus 20%. So as a human being, we tend to capture the negative more than the positive. But having said that, during this time, a bad monsoon is coinciding with disturbance in West Asia. So therefore, both the things are reinforcing each other. And remember, while the retail inflation is at 4.4%, the wholesale inflation is close to 10%. So what I can tell for sure that the methodology of compilation of consumer price index in India is very robust. The data compilation is done with utmost integrity. But since we are answering different questions, so it's no wonder that the answer is very different.
Agreed. Absolutely. So that really helps for us, the retail customers, to understand how these two things are really different. Tell me one thing, Sujan. When the monsoon news drops on your screen, what's that one number that you secretly check first?
See, the headline All India deficit number or All India, say for example, you saw in June, there was a 40% deficit. It was the fifth worst June rainfall in last 126 years. So that is something which grabs attention, which goes to the. But what is important to understand that this actually doesn't matter. If there is a flood in Assam and if there is a drought in Vidarbha, still the monsoon can be a normal monsoon, but its implication can be very different. So what is most important is to look at what is the distribution of rainfall in the regions which are more dependent on monsoon, which is Eastern India and Central India. Now, one number I track every Friday is the Kharif showing. And Kharif showing number as of now is telling you that it's 16% lower than, as of 10th of July, it's 16% lower than the long period average. And for products like pulses, oilseeds, it's more than 20% lower. So that clearly gives you where we actually stand, what kind of deficit can happen for what kind of crop. So one number, if you have to track, it should be during the monsoon season, it should be the showing number. And that will tell you a story how it's going to impact the economy, how it's going to impact the market.
Sure. Thank you. Now, Sujan, this one is really relevant for our retail investors. Does a single bad monsoon matter a retail investor's portfolio, or is it just noise and we should simply ignore it?
See, as I said, it doesn't impact the economy as much as used to impact. And the impact is far lower on the equity market, because if you look at the index heavyweights, like banks, like IT, like pharma, like FMCG, like auto, the impact of rural demand or impact of monsoon on each of these is, it's not that there is zero impact, but the impact is not very large. Right. So in that sense, it doesn't impact the market so much on the overall level, but it certainly impacts at the sectoral level. For example, monsoon has a much stronger correlation with rural demand. So therefore, sectors which are dependent on rural demand, for example, small ticket FMCG, for example, small ticket consumer durables, for example, two-wheelers, for example, fertilizers, for example, other agrochemicals, there obviously the impact can be significantly more. Second, also it creates an impact in terms of interest rate. Because of a bad monsoon, if the food inflation is going up, even if RBI does not directly react and increase the interest rate, RBI will be far more circumspect in reducing interest rate. So a long pause in rate cuts can happen because of that. So that indirectly has a negative impact on equity valuations, because there is an inverse relationship between the interest rate and the P ratios. So if interest rate goes up, P ratios go down and vice versa. So in that sense, it can impact. But frankly speaking, one bad monsoon doesn't make too much of a difference. But if there are two bad monsoons, then it's an altogether different story.
Absolutely. Got it. That makes a lot of sense. Sujan, before we end our today's show, I want to know the big picture here. What's the one thing about the monsoon that the whole market is ignoring right now, but will quietly decide India's growth for the next 5 to 10 years?
It's not really the quarterly earnings, because, at the end of the day, good rainfall, bad rainfall is a binary event. So, but having said that, I think the bigger picture is in the context of water management. If you look at there are few things in India which are not happening the way it should happen. For example, we are cultivating crops which are extremely water intensive. For example, paddy. For example, sugarcane. And these cultivations are happening in areas which are traditionally water deficit, or which are actually getting impacted by the changing pattern of monsoon. So, as a buffer, people are drawing on groundwater, and groundwater is until unless it's getting refilled, it's a exhaustible commodity. So, consequently, this has longer term implications. And my sense is that water productivity, whether in terms of choice of crops, choice of seeds, choice of fertilizer use, choice of nutrient use, the irrigation technique, watershed management, all these things will none of these will have a big impact in a particular year, but over a 10-year period, how these are managed will largely decide how India's agriculture, and more importantly, agricultural produce prices, food prices move. And therefore, in that sense, it can have very small incremental effect in a year, but over a decade, the impact can compound. And I don't think we are putting enough attention towards this integrated system, from seed up to the marketing of agricultural product, the cold chain, the waste management, and the overall system, the irrigation, type of irrigation, that type of crop. This is something which we are quietly ignoring, but this can come back and haunt us in the longer term.
Sujan, thank you so much for those insights. That was the kind of stuff that you genuinely do not find in the textbooks. And to everyone watching, that's the big picture for today. If this changed the way you look at the rains, your grocery bills, or the markets even a little bit, do that one thing for me. Hit that subscribe button and drop your biggest takeaway in the comments. I actually read them. Stay sharp, stay invested. I am Devang Mehta signing off.
Investments in securities market are subject to market risks. Read all the related documents carefully before investing.